Sunol, California, sat tucked away in Alameda County during the sweltering summer of 1981. A Black Labrador mix named Bosco recently faced off against two human. However, the local residents weren't just making a joke when they cast their official ballots for the canine. Because Sunol was unincorporated, this specific municipal office carried zero legislative power despite its massive local prestige. This honorary position allowed Bosco to maintain massive main character energy, while the town effectively, the local humans running for the gig, a businessman and a random resident, were apparently so uninspiring that the electorate was looking for any excuse to throw a metaphorical brick through the window of the status quo. Enter Brad Lieber, a Sunol local, who looked at his dog, Bosco Ramos, and realized the pup was the only being in town with a 100% approval rating. Brad wrote Bosco in as a candidate, and the town didn't just back him. They sent him to the top. Bosco Ramos, a half-Labrador, half-Rottweiler beast. The humans who lost had to face the soul-crushing reality that they were officially less popular than a creature that licks the mailman and eats things it finds on the sidewalk. It was a seismic shift in local power that proved Sunol residents didn't want a policy expert. They wanted a good boy who wouldn't raise their taxes or give annoying speeches. This wasn't just some weekend fluke either. Bosco would go on to rule his domain with an iron paw for 13 years, eventually becoming the most famous politician in the world. Sunol had successfully traded political bickering for belly rubs, and honestly, the town had never been more unified. Now, if you thought a dog winning an election was just a funny local anecdote to tell at a dive bar, you clearly haven't met the 1980s Chinese Communist Party. By 1987, Bosco wasn't just a local mayor who accepted belly rubs as campaign contribution. The People's Daily, which is the official newspaper for the CCP, decided to take Bosco's political. They published a massive article using Bosco. Their argument was basically, look at these goofy Americans. They are so decadent, and their system is so broken that they are literally electing four-legged creatures to public office. They framed Bosco's victory as the definitive proof that Western democracy was a complete dumpster fire and a total. Imagine being a global superpower and your primary propaganda strategy is capitalism makes you stupid. They were trying to dunk on the U.S. so hard it backfired into the most hilarious international incident of the Cold War era. They labeled the whole situation as evidence of the decadence and failure of Western democracy. But the residents of Sunol were built different. Instead of being embarrassed, they treated the CCP's trash talk like a glowing 5-star review. They were eventually invited to join a pro-democracy demonstration to prove that electing a dog wasn't a sign of social collapse. It was the ultimate flex of freedom. Their logic was ironclad. In a truly free society, you have the right to vote for a literal fire hydrant sniffer just because you are annoyed with the human candidates. Bosco became By 1990, the hype was so real that Bosco Ramos actually landed a spot. He sat there on national television while millions of Americans watched the most successful canine politician in history discuss his career. He was the only mayor in history who could bark at a mailman and still have higher approval. It was the peak of dog power, proving that sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is to give it to someone who cares more about treats than taxes. But the most shocking part, while California was busy turning a lab mix into a suburban legend, Kentucky decided to hold the beer and raise the stakes with some high-octane Southern fried entrepreneurship. Welcome to Rabbit Hash, an unincorporated speck on the map in Boone County that looks exactly like the set of a movie where the protagonist learns the true meaning of Christmas while drinking cheap bourbon. Now, Rabbit Hash had a major problem. Its heart and soul is the General Store, a legendary building from 1831 that has seen more history than a shelf of dusty encyclopedias. The store is privately owned by the Rabbit Hash Historical Society, which essentially means they have to pay the bills and keep the roof from collapsing without hitting up the taxpayers for a municipal bailout. Enter Don Clare, the resident mastermind and president of the Historical Society. Don clearly understood that if you want people to give you money, you shouldn't just ask for a boring donation. You should ask for a bribe. In 1998, Don and the gang decided that Rabbit Hash needed a mayor. But since the town technically doesn't exist as a formal municipality, a human mayor would be about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. So, they turned to the animal kingdom and invented the most honest electoral system in human history: the pay-to-play canine democracy. Here's how the grift, the fundraising effort, works. Votes cost exactly $1. There are no limits. You want to vote 500 times? Swipe your card, big spender. Your money is just as green as a local's. It's basically like a mobile game full of microtransactions, but instead of getting a legendary skin for your avatar, you get a German Shepherd mix named Goofy Bornman Calhoun running the show. What started as a weird local fundraiser was about to become a massive international sensation. This wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a survival strategy for a town with its back against the wall. Goofy won the inaugural 1998 election, and suddenly this tiny town had a revenue stream that They weren't just electing a mascot, they were building a global brand based on the fact that humans are objectively terrible at governing themselves. But dogs are excellent at sitting and looking dignified while you hand over a $20 bill to keep the town solvent. It was the ultimate grind set for a town with no stoplights, but a massive amount of historical overhead to maintain. By the time they realized they could charge people for the privilege of democratic participation, Rabbit Hash had accidentally stumbled upon the only form of government that actually makes everyone happy: literal, transparent, animal-based corruption for the greater good. Don Clare essentially turned the act of voting into a charitable impulse buy, and the world was more than ready to open its wallet for the next four-legged official. Rabbit Hash didn't just stop at one dog, they built a freaking empire of paws and fur that puts the Habsburgs to shame. Think of it like Game of Thrones. But instead of beheadings and backstabbing, there are belly rubs and zero. Following in the paw prints of the legends, the town established a legitimate political dynasty that proves people are way more willing to open their wallets for a French bulldog than a guy. The first pioneer to take the oath of office, which probably involved a lot of panting and a firm stay, was Goofy Bornman Calhoun in 1998. Goofy was a German Shepherd mix who basically became the George Washington of canine governance. He didn't just look good in a bandana, he was a fundraising machine. His election wasn't about policy, it was about saving the town's general store, a historic landmark from 1831 that was looking a little rough around the edges. The strategy was simple: pay-to-play democracy. In Rabbit Hash, $1 equals one vote, and you can vote as many times as your bank account allows. It's like a lobbyist's fever dream. But the money actually goes toward preserving history instead of buying a third yacht for a senator. After Goofy's reign, the torch was passed to Junior in 2004, a Black Labrador who kept the vibes immaculate. But the real glass ceiling, or maybe just a screen door, was shattered in 2008 when Lucy Lou, a border collie, became the first female mayor in the town's history. Lucy Lou wasn't just a political figurehead. She was a celebrity who actually managed to herd the voters into a frenzy. But the most shocking part by the time 2016 rolled around, the town elected Bryneth Paltrow, a pit bull with a name that is objectively 5 times better than any human pun I've ever heard. She carried the mantle until the absolute while the rest of the world was arguing on Twitter, Rabbit Hash was witnessing a historic landslide. Wilbur Beast, a French bulldog who looks like a charismatic potato with ears. We're talking about a record-breaking 22,985 total votes cast across the board, with Wilbur snagging 13,143 of those for himself. This wasn't just a local joke anymore. It was a massive operation that raised over $22,000 for the Rabbit Hash Historical Society. Wilbur became the highest-grossing mayor in the town's history, proving that in the world of satirical politics, if you want to win big, you've got to be under 2 feet tall and have a tongue that's constantly hanging out of your mouth. These dogs aren't just mascots. They are the financial backbone of a community that realized long ago that a wagging tail is a much better campaign promise than anything a human could ever offer. If you roll into Sunol, California today, you aren't greeted by a stuffy bronze bust of some guy who died of gout in 1890 after stealing land from his neighbors. No, you get Bosco Ramos in all his metallic glory. Unveiled in 2008 right in front of the post office, this bronze statue depicts the legendary Black Lab-Rottweiler mix standing tall, probably wondering. The inscription reads, Bosco Ramos, Mayor of Sunol, 19, a dog who loved every human. Think about that for a second. Can you name most of them don't even like their own running mates. Bosco didn't care about your tax bracket or your stance on zoning laws. He just wanted to know if you had a spare hot dog. This wasn't just a quirky small-town bit. It was a masterclass in political satire that eventually paved the way for towns like Idlewild, California, and Cormorant, Minnesota. To realize that a golden retriever or a Great Pyrenees is significantly more qualified to lead than a guy who uses 3 different fonts on a campaign flyer. These canine candidates represent they don't take dark money from lobbyists, unless those lobbyists are packing milk bones. They don't have PR teams to spin their latest scandals because their only scandal is digging a hole in the neighbor's flower bed. It's the ultimate protest vote that actually yields results. In Rabbit Hash, the pay-to-play system is the most honest version of American democracy we've ever seen. You want to vote? Pay $1. It's transparent. At least in Rabbit Hash, your bribe goes toward fixing a historic general store instead of funding a smear campaign against your opponent's choice of mustard. These towns realized that when life in an unincorporated community gets weird, you might as well lean into the chaos and elect someone who is constitutionally incapable of lying to you. Bosco, Wilbur Beast, and Lucy Liu are the true political icons of our era because they never once promised to lower taxes. They just promised to be good boys and girls. In a world of suits and empty promises, the dog mayor is the only politician who actually wags his tail because he's happy to see you. Not because. So, if you love history but hate boring textbooks, hit subscribe or I am calling the feds. And let me know in the comments.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!